Do people you know ever, this is a question that I get. For instance, whenever I do a book, my family gets the manuscript and looks for the family pets. Do you sometimes put people you know?
I have had, well, to a degree, I try not to, I try not to be obvious about it, no, especially if they're not, if they're disagreeable characters.
Yeah.
I'm real careful not to use anybody's real name. I get a lot of my character names out of the telephone directories. But I'm careful never to use the same first name with the last name out of the directory. I'll pick up the surname here and the given name somewhere else. I also use how to name the baby type book, for character names. But I had one character in The Good Old Boys who was an old, semi-senile old drifter who would just ride around over the country and drop in at ranches and farms and bum a meal and stay the night. When I was a kid, about 10 years old, there was such an old fellow who had come by my grandparents' little ranch a couple of times a year. He'd spend the night, sleep in my granddad's feed barn. He was an early day conservationist. He did not believe in spoiling good water by immersing himself in it. So, consequently, unless the weather was bad, my grandmother always tried to feed him on the front porch. But I put him in the book. As I remembered him, I moved him back 30 years, and I changed his name. But otherwise, I wrote him as a 10-year-old, remembered him. I've had 3 people identify that real character to me. So, I didn't disguise him as well as I thought. I had another character who was a secondary character in The Time It Never Rained. My main character is a kind of a medium-sized rancher. And his best friend is a fellow named Page Malden, who is ambitious. He wants to become known as the biggest rancher in West Texas. And at the beginning of the book, he is, but most of it's on borrowed money. Everything he has is mortgaged to the ears. And as the drought goes on, he loses it bit by bit by bit till it's gone. And I knew a fellow to whom this happened. I didn't base the character so much on him, but what happened to that character I based on him. And one day, my main character's name is Charlie Flagg. One day I ran into this fellow out at the auction sale. He said, "I just finished your book." And I started looking for the door. He said, that old Charlie Flagg was just like me. He never understood that he was the other character, and I didn't tell him either.
Well, you're actually very wise not to use real people, because I have run into descendants of people I've written about, and some of the times when I write about them, I try to tell them historically accurately, and not always flattering. And I did run into, at one signing, there was a woman there. It was the judge's wife, and it was the sole descendant of one of the characters one of the people I'd written about, and she was not happy. She said, "I'm sure he didn't drink that much." I said, "Everybody drank that much." And I'm sure he was better looking than that. I said, "But I thought he was extremely good looking. He was my favorite character." But she was definitely not happy. So when I started writing about Cynthia Ann Parker in Texas, I called the editor there at Ballantine, and I asked him if I could get into trouble for using real names and real people. He said, "Are they dead?" I said, "Oh, yeah." He said, "No problem." Except that people do get offended, the relatives sometimes.
There are Parkers all over Texas.
There are Parkers all over the world. There's an Italian Parker who's been in touch with me. One of Quanah's grandchildren, I think, went to Italy to study art, and guess what happened? So, yeah.
Quanah Parker, of course, was the son of Cynthia Ann Parker, and Quanah Parker was half Comanche, half white, and he was very much, he was kind of the last war chief of the Comanches before the Comanches went on the reservation. And once they went to the reservation, then he kind of became their leader and their liaison between them and the white, particularly the ranchers who leased the Indian lands to graze their cattle. and he became quite well off because he managed to take quite a bit of the lease money for Quanah Parker. But a very interesting person who bridged, you might say, two worlds and did fairly well at it, except that he didn't know about gas lamps. He and another Indian chief spent the night in Fort Worth in a hotel, and when they went to bed, they blew out the gas lamp, not knowing any better. They knew about kerosene lamps. So the other chief died. Quanah Parker managed to survive, but he lived in two worlds and was quite successful, a real interesting character.
Well, I've been reading The Far Country, which is one of your older books, and Elmer, one of the subplots in there is a Comanche family trying to get them to safety as things are falling apart, their world's falling apart, and their land and their buffalo, the bison, are being killed. And the thing about Elmer is that he writes about so many cultures. And is there any particular writer that influenced you to do that, or is that just from your own heart?
I guess from my own heart, except that, you know, I was always interested by the Indians. You know, they were in our part of the world before we were, but then of course there were other tribes of Indians before them. The Comanches came into Texas roughly around 1700, driving out the Apaches and most of the other Indian tribes that were already there. They were preceded by the Apaches and many other, particularly farmer tribes, you know, who farmed and cultivated land and so forth. And it's very interesting to follow that procession of peoples changing constantly over the centuries. And you know, they're part of the fabric of our history and part of who we are, really.
Well, this I'm going to jump a little bit here because this kind of goes into one of the questions I want to talk to you about. When my book, Ride the Wind, came out, which is about Quanah Parker and Cynthia M. Parker, the New York copywriter, I guess whoever did the cover copy, said, you know, the Comanche Indians, a proud and innocent people. I said, not on their best days. Proud, maybe. Innocent, no. And this is the thing that people, and this is what we've been talking about, political correctness. People tend to forget that Native Americans were busily making war on each other. And yes, you know, the white invasion was not a good thing for them, but I like to face it squarely. I think we should have a balance. And the thing about Elmer's books, and what I try to do, is to show that there's good and bad on all sides.
You know, this political correctness thing has always bothered me. I guess I came along too early to accept it. A little older. I think you have to, if you're going to be honest about history, you have to take it as it really was and not as you wish it had been. Right. And I think a lot of writing today and revisionist history presents things as it should have been rather than as it really was. The Indians were fighting each other long before the white men ever reached the shores of America.
And brutally so in some
and
cases.
Continued to do so, and at times with extreme brutality. So we have to accept that, or we should accept that as fact, you know. But it's not proper, or at least in my view, it's not proper to judge people of other times by our mores today. We have to judge them by the mores of their own time and their own cultures. You know, if you can't blame the Comanches if that was part of their culture, you know, but you have to accept it as having been the reality. And I think too often today we try to soft pedal some of this. We're blaming our white ancestors for everything that possibly went wrong, but it was going wrong long before they got here. And Conquest, I always look back at Patricia Limerick's book, The Legacy of Conquest. She seemed to blame most of everything that's ever happened wrong in this country on our white Anglo-Saxon forebears. And they had a lot to be blamed about, but they didn't do it all. It was going on before they got here. they just continued the process with a higher degree of sophistication and better arms.
Yeah, I was going to say better armature.
Yeah.
Yeah.